Hello, and welcome to Episode 2 of the Chapel Hill Flight Training Series. My name is Daniel, and I'll be your flight instructor today. We're currently at the Horace Williams Airport in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, one of the most historic airports in the Southeast. Presidents George H.W. Bush and Gerald Ford learned to fly here during World War II, along with tens of thousands who used this airport to become pilots, transport university doctors and officials, attend business meetings and sports events, or visit friends and family at UNC. You too will soon become part of this airport's fabled history. Let's begin. We're going to be flying the Cessna 172, the most produced airplane in the world. It has a 4-cylinder engine that makes 180 horsepower, cruises at about 115 knots, and is renowned for its stability and prevalence in flight training. In this lesson, we'll discuss two of the most important flight maneuvers, takeoff and landing. I've set the airplane up on runway 9. First, we want to make sure that the airplane is configured properly with elevator trim set for takeoff and flaps set to 0. Then, when we're ready, we add full power and simultaneously add some right rudder to maintain centerline. Single-engine propeller aircraft create left turning tendencies, but that's for another lesson. We verify that the airspeed indicator is alive and our engine instruments are in the green. At 55 knots, we gently pull back on the yoke and we become airborne. Placing the nose of the airplane on the horizon will give us about 75 knots, the airspeed that will maximize our rate of climb. The keys to a good takeoff are smooth control inputs, maintaining centerline on the runway, and using the appropriate pitch attitude. Too nose high and the airplane will get slow and stall. Too fast and you may not clear obstacles at the end of the runway and you'll annoy the neighbors. Now let's move on to landing. I've positioned the airplane about 4 miles east of the airport. We'll be landing on runway 27. Since we're on a straight-in approach, we'll use what I call the 3-2-1 method. At 3.5 miles, we'll reduce the power to approximately 1,500 RPM and below 110 knots, deploy 10 degrees of flaps. Let's pitch for 85 knots. At this point, we control our airspeed with pitch adjustments, and we control our descent rate with power adjustments. To speed up, pitch down. To slow down, pitch up. To descend more, reduce power. To descend less, add power. At 2.5 miles, go to 20 degrees of flaps and pitch the airplane for 75 knots. At 1.5 miles, go to 30 degrees of flaps and pitch the airplane for 65 knots. How do we know where the optimum glide path is? At Horace Williams Airport, we have a light system next to the runway that aids us. 2 white lights means too high. 1 red and 1 white means on the proper glide path, and 2 red means too low. When the nose of the airplane gets to the edge of the runway, smoothly reduce power to idle and keep the same descent angle until about 15 feet above the ground. Then, slowly, in small increments, bring the nose up to level the airplane off at 5 feet above the ground to bleed off excess airspeed, and then raise the nose to the end of the runway until touchdown. The goal is to touch down on the big white blocks 1,000 feet down the runway. The key to a good landing is understanding the physics of what's happening. We can't touch down at our final approach speed of 65 knots. That would be too fast. In order to slow down, we reduce power to idle and increase the pitch attitude, also called a landing flare. Pitching up also increases lift and reduces our descent rate, something we need for a smooth landing. If we pitch up too quickly or too much, we create too much lift and our descent becomes a climb. That's why it's important to break down your landing flare into small increments. For each pitch angle, there is an airspeed at which the airplane will begin to descend faster again. As it reaches that airspeed, move to the next pitch angle until you reach the landing sight picture with the nose on the far edge of the runway. If you time your pitch changes correctly and start the process at the proper altitude, you'll grease your landings every time. In our next lesson, we'll talk about the traffic pattern and go-arounds. For now, blue skies and go heels.